Hi there, Will here, and today I'd like to show you something that I think you might find quite interesting. You see, this is a Yashica T4, cult point and shoot, Zeiss lens, very popular for its form factor and the fact that a lot of people have lauded it on the internet. And this is pretty much the exact same camera. For a bit of context as to why I'm sitting here comparing two point and shoots, a little while ago my mate David came up to me and said, Will, I've got a camera that you need to try out. It is basically a Yashica T4 in pretty much every way besides the lens. And I said, I don't really care, David, it's a point and shoot. And he said, no, trust me, you want to shoot it. And time went on and he kept being on my case about it because David's an excellent salesman, and eventually he sold me on the idea of comparing these two cameras, so I went out and put a roll through each of them. Before we get into comparing any of the results from them, which are exceptionally interesting, by the way, why don't we compare these two cameras alongside each other, just as cameras? This is the very popular, cult idolized, and apparently amazing Yashica T4. And this is a Yashica Mini Tech Super. And they're the same camera, basically. The only differences are the lens. This has a Zeiss lens, which is, to be fair, its most popular characteristic. And it has one extra setting that this one doesn't have. And you may think to yourself, what does he mean they're the exact same camera? Well, allow me to take you through the settings on the Yashica T4 and the Yashica Mini Tech Super. We've got auto flash, red eye reduction flash, fill flash, no flash or the little night symbol mode, and for the Yashica T4 Infinity, or rather landscape mode, and the Yashica Mini Tech Super just switches back to auto flash. So it's got one less mode, the Yashica Mini Tech Super. Does that matter? We're going to find out shortly. But in essence, what I'd assume the landscape mode is that it forces the aperture to stop down slightly, probably. Those are just the menu settings though, and to be fair, there could be interchangeable menu settings in many cameras. So, why don't we compare the technical specifications for these? Yashica T4, 35mm f3.5 Carl Zeiss T-Star lens. It's a nice one. Yashica Mini Tech Super, 33mm f3.5 Yashica lens. Shutter speeds, Yashica T4, 1 second to a 700th of a second. Yashica Mini Tech Super, 1 second to a 700th of a second. ISO range, 50 ISO to 3200 ISO, automatic DX code reading on both of them. Minimum focus distance, which is a point that's been brought up in some reviews for the T4, saying that a lot of point and shoots have a minimum focus distance of 50 centimeters, and the reason the T4 is better than most other point and shoots is because its minimum focus distance is 35 centimeters. Yashica Mini Tech Super, 35 centimeter minimum focusing distance. You see where I'm going with this? Then, size. Yashica Mini Tech Super is pretty much the exact same size, minus this little ergonomic thumb hold bump thing on the Yashica T4, which in my experience hasn't really served much of a purpose. It's not really in the right position for holding the camera anyway, because I hold it more in center. If you're holding it like on the edge, you've got a super weird grip where the thumb grip is anyway. So the Yashica Mini Tech Super, ergonomically, it doesn't have that thumb hold, but it sits super nicely in your hand because it's got the same slight curve on the front as the Yashica T4. With regards to the viewfinders, Yashica T4 has an issue, or maybe it's not an issue, maybe it's just design, but it has been noted by people besides me, where the frame lines are not actually in the center of the frame. So when I put rolls through it, I've been slightly confused as to what I'm actually composing for, whereas the Yashica Mini Tech Super has a very nicely centered viewfinder frame line situation going on, and I think it's polarized or something, because it's got this blue hue to it, which kills the highlights somewhat, which is a feature the Mamiya 7 has, by the way, and the Yashica T4 doesn't have. The Yashica T4 also has this slidey cover thing, which is useful and nice to protect the lens, your lovely Zeiss T-Star lens, but one of the most frequent failure points on these cameras is that the spring that makes things pop backwards and forwards over there breaks, and then you've got a Yashica Mini Tech Super, basically, with a Zeiss lens. No, I'm kidding. And the Mini Tech doesn't have that feature, and as a result, the lens is slightly more open to the elements, but I keep mine, or David's rather, inside a pouch, and that solves that problem. I think we can fairly say that they're probably the exact same camera in different housings with a slightly different lens at this point. But that isn't really the ultimate goal here. The ultimate goal is to see what the results compare like. So, on an expedition assisting my mate Aubrey, I took some comparative photographs, and this is what things look like. First, I'm going to show you some Hasselblad FlexTight scan results, max resolution of both of the cameras, to give you an idea of what things look like when you essentially drum scan them. And both of these examples were scanned with the exact same settings and have been set to the exact same level to retain the blacks. This is a Yashica Minitech Super Shot. Pretty sharp, slightly wide, point and shoot photograph, nothing special. This is a Yashica T4 shot. Now you will notice that the T4 photograph has more contrast going on, and I'd assume that has to do with one of the features of the T4 that is always touted in the lens, being its micro contrast, which is cool. It's a nice feature, but it's not worth however much more compared to the Minitech when you can go into the Minitech file in post and make it look like this. Slight adjustment and suddenly it's the exact same frame. With regards to sharpness, here's a 100% zoom of the T4 frame and a 100% zoom of the Minitech frame. The T4 lens is definitely sharper, okay? I will say that. But you'll have to decide for yourself whether you're ever going to scan anything, drum scan anything off a Yashica T4 or a Minitech Super and use it in a context where people are going to be looking at it and deciding whether or not this level of sharpness discrepancy actually makes an impact. For me, I'd rather have the Minitech. Here's a couple more frames to compare. The wideness of the Minitech does have an impact, and I do like the 35mm aspect ratio more than the 33mm, even though it's not much of a difference and you can crop into it if you like. Here's a frame of the model from the shoot with Aubrey, Andrea, who hasn't popped up in a video before, but might at some point in the future. And here's a 100% zoom of the T4 frame. I'm going to say beforehand that the Minitech one is slightly out of focus on the eye. It didn't land focus on her eye for whatever reason, but in terms of sharpness itself, you can see the Minitech, whilst it threw focus onto her arm as opposed to her eye, is pretty damn close to the T4 in terms of rendering. And here are a couple more comparison frames. I made a bunch of photographs with each of these because I had to blast a roll through it, and I treated it as a point and shoot basically and took my time, so I had like 2 weeks with each of them. And to be honest, I'd rather take the Minitech out again than the T4. The fact that I don't own the T4 and I'm slightly worried about it dying in my hands is of course a factor in that, and it does have improved results compared to the Minitech, but the results are not so much better that you'd want to spend what is essentially 5 times more on the T4 versus the Minitech Super. And just to clarify, it is the Minitech Super that has these results. There's a Yashica Minitech AF, which is not the same camera at all. And in my eyes, I'm pretty sure that these are basically the same camera with different shells and a different lens. The lens is definitely not the same lens. You can clearly see that the T4 lens is superior, but it's not so much more superior that you would not easily get away with using this instead of the T4. The only time it's ever going to become apparent that you're shooting with a camera that has a much nicer lens is if you're scanning drum scans to use for something. And I'd hazard a guess that most people that want to buy a T4 are not really planning to scan everything drum scan resolution and share it with people that way. And if that's the case, then you'd be much better off buying the Yashica Minitech Super, I reckon. I've heard people say they're somewhat rare, and there's very little information about them floating around online, but I've checked out eBay and there's a decent amount of them floating around for a very decent price, so if you act fast, you might be able to score yourself a Minitech Super. And this doesn't impact me in any way. I just reckon you might have been interested in picking up a camera that has high-piece camera-esque results for a much lower price. But the T4 has a Carl Zeiss lens! Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that little comparison and can use it to make a decision going forward about whether you'd like to own a T4 or some other camera. If this is the first time you've stopped by the channel, I put a video out every week for a year and a bit now, and there's a lot of cool stuff that I've gotten up to around South Africa, making photographs and going on adventures. So I'd recommend checking some of them out. And a big thank you to the people who support the channel on my Buy Me a Coffee, as always. Today is Saturday, And I'm heading out on a trip on Monday probably, which is going to have been made possible by my Buy Me a Coffee members. Anyway, I'll see you soon.